Now I request Maitri Shindeji present the bouquet to Sri K. Arvind Rao Garu, former Director General of Police. Now I request Colonel Dr. Srinivas Rao Garu present the bouquet to MLC, former MLC Ramchander Rao Garu. Now I request Sri N. Ramchander Rao Garu take over further proceedings.
Namaskar to everyone here. It's my pleasure to invite you all to this evening program, which will be addressed by one former DGP of our state, Andhra Pradesh, then, who is also well versed in many issues concerning the nation, and also Sri Hazony, who has also written several books on several issues, and he hails from Israel. We have taken an opportunity while he is in Hyderabad to organize this lecture, A Virtue of Nationalism. He has written a book on virtue of nationalism, apart from many other books. And this subject of nationalism in India also, in the present context, it is very much necessary that we debate and we deliberate things on nationalism. We have seen several issues which are concerning our nation, and then the issues in India and the issues in Israel are to many extent it is similar. The cultural issues are the nation's the survival issue, the multi-faith issue, all these things are there which even Israel suffers. And today, India, we all know that India is a great nation with several languages, several religions, and several areas, several tribes, we have multi-faith country, and several rulers have ruled us. And in this background, India's nationalism, I think, is very much to be appreciated, because since years and ages together, we were under foreign rule, foreign yoke. In 326 BC, when Alexander came and invaded this country, he ruled this country indirectly by keeping Seleucus here. Then Portuguese came, French came, then Italians also came, Genghis Khan came, Mughals came, Britishers came ultimately. And what they could not destroy in India was the Indian ethos and Indian culture. And that is the greatness of our country. And that is where today's India's nationalism stands very strong. Right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Assam to Ahmedabad, if you see, there are several contrasts in the language and other things, but still we all feel proud that we belong to one nation, that is Indian nation, India. That is Bharat. And now the attempts are being made to destroy this nationalistic character of our country. I can say there are many left liberals who call themselves most advanced intellectuals or this and that. And the same sort of people who are abroad, Western countries, and also US and other places. Today morning when I was discussing with a guest, he agreed with me that the left liberals, basically liberals, they are destroying the nationhood and national character of a particular country. And no country is free from this, even the US and Europe and other countries. I always believe, I had been to Israel several times, I have seen how Israel has risen from scattered people and in the world, and they came together and they started their own country. the country which actually belonged to them, they became refugees in other parts of the world because of several historical reasons. And ultimately, very recently, you can say in this century only, they came to Israel and started their own country. And today, Israel is one of the most powerful nations in the world. It is a half of Kerala and half of Hyderabad population. Such a small country today, Israel is a very strong country. And that's why I believe that if the country has to develop, it is neither the capitalism, neither the socialism. It is only the nationalism that can make a country great. And we have seen Japan, we have seen many other countries who stood by that nation. And nationalism means, very frankly speaking, is a love for the nation, a desire to develop the nation. This is what nationalism is in a simple word. But we have deep-rooted issues in us where nationalism is shaken. We have a cultural imperialism which is invading the minds of our youngsters who are trying to tell you you are not a single nation, you are a multi-nation. They are trying to divide you in the name of the caste, religion and everything. And they are trying to destroy this great nation. And that is what today we require, that our youngsters, our generation should know what is nationalism. I am speaking in the context of India. So without taking much time, now Mr. Arvind Raoji is here. So Mr. Arvind Raoji, everyone knows that he was Director General of Police while in United Andhra Pradesh, and he is also a scholar. He did his PhD in Sanskrit. He has several merits to his career, and several. He is almost a nationalist to the core. So therefore, we thought that he is the best person to address us. But before he addresses us, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Sri IVR Krishnarao Garu, former Chief Secretary of Andhra Pradesh, and then Tirupati Rao Garu, former Vice Chancellor. I would also acknowledge the presence of Sri N.V. Subhash Garu, our spokesperson, Sri Kishore Reddy, Kishore, our spokesperson, and then Sri Dr. Mohan Rao Saab, who is also Public Administration Professor at Osmania University. I also acknowledge the presence of many stalwarts here who are come here who are from various walks of life. And above all, I acknowledge the presence of our elder, who has been our guiding force and light, and who has been guiding us in several programs like this. Hanuman Chaudhary Garu is here amongst us, and it is a privilege for us that he is amongst us today. And apart from that, Dr. Anil is there. He is a cardiologist, very noted cardiologist in the city. So he came from Karimnagar only to attend this program and to hear us. So now I would request Sri Krishna Reddy to introduce the guest, Sri Arvind Rao Garu, and then.
It's my pleasure and honor to introduce today's distinguished speakers. I think the Nationalist Income Forum always have a wide variety of issues and ideas. We are depicted with different backgrounds. Today we have an international speaker who is Professor Reuben. He is the president of the Edmund Burke Foundation. This foundation is a public affairs institute which is based on the Washington, and this foundation has hosted several national conservatism conferences since 2019. As the topic of the lectures, that is the virtue of nationalism. It is also a book by our professor. This book was published by BSA Books in 2018, and this book has been selected as a Conservative Book of the Year for 2019 and was an Amazon bestseller, both international diplomacy and nationalism. So his most recent book also, The Conservatism, A Rediscovery, was published by Regnery in May 2022. So in his credit, there are several books, which is also another to name, The Philosophy of Hebrew Scriptures, which was published by Cambridge Press in 2012, which was on the second place, Prose award for this best book category of theology and religion by the Association of American Publishers. So likewise, we can go on his credentials, his ideas. It has also published several articles, the research works which was appeared in Wall Street journals, New York Times, Fox News, CNN, NPR, Time Magazine. I think the list goes on, and in all the internationally reputed, the journals and the newspapers, it has published. And he has also received several awards, to his credit in his entire career. So he was also graduated from Princeton University with a BA in East Asian Studies in the 1986 and PhD from Rutgers University in Political Theory in the 1993. So this is a brief profile which I would like to share with you. And also, as we have another distinguished speaker, I think both the Telugu states doesn't require an introduction about Dr. K. Arvind Rao, IPS, retired as the Director General of Police of United Andhra Pradesh. His rich and vast experience in policing and administration as a top cop and anti-Naxal expert, Dr. Arvind Rao played an important role in effectively dealing with left-wing extremism in United Andhra Pradesh. During his distinguished career in the police, security, safety departments, Dr. Arvind Rao served as the Additional Director General of the State Intelligence Department, Additional Commissioner of Police, Hyderabad, Inspector General of Police Greyhounds, and IGP in the Crime Investigation Department. And also, apart from the policing, he has also has academic degree, he did PhD in Sanskrit and authored several books on Sanatana Dharma. So renowned for his sincerity and simplicity, Dr. Arvind Rao developed a keen interest in studying Sanatana Dharma during his service, and this led to him to pursue masters in Sanskrit under aegis of his gurus Padma Shri Pillala Ramchander ji at Mahabodhyaya and Sri Tatwendra Swamiji. Dr. Arvind Rao developed a deep understanding of Sanatana Dharma, Vedanta, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras, and Bhashyas. Post his retirement, Dr. Arvind Rao has authored several books in Telugu and English. Besides the book Analysis of Jananam in Upanishads in Sanskrit, he has also deeply woven ancient Vedic wisdom with practical knowledge and rendered several positions with that. So lastly, Dr. Arvind Rao has been the recipient of several awards and was also conferred with the honorary title of Vachaspati by Rashtriya Vidyapitham, a deemed university of Government of India, for his valuable services to the field of Sanskrit studies. And Sir has been extensively traveling and guiding and encouraging the youth about our Sanatana Dharma. So we have pleasure to have these two distinguished speakers in this great evening. So thank you, sir, having here and spending time with us. Thank you.
So now I request Dr. Arvind Kumar to kindly speak. Arvind Rao.
Sri Ramchander Rao, President of the function, Dr. Yoram Hazony, and distinguished guests and audience who are present here. I see very eminent people among the audience, Padma Shri, Hanuman Chaudhary Garu, IYR Krishna Rao Garu, and many other very many eminent people. In fact, I am very much embarrassed to hear that a lot of introduction was given about me when we are sitting next to a great political philosopher. Mr. Yoram Hazony is a great writer, is a great political philosopher who has written not necessarily written, but he is an advocate, a very strong advocate of conservatism and nationalism. So in fact, I came here to listen to him. And in fact, according to the program, he was supposed to speak. But anyway, there was too much introduction about me. I am sorry for that. So about this nationalism, I am not going to speak much because we have to listen to him. And I will just share a couple of ideas. Nationalism actually, it has certain, the very idea, the very word nationalism, it shows that we have certain shared values which we have to protect. There is some culture, there is a strong culture, and then there is also a culture means it is also associated with religion. In fact, religion is always an integral component of nationalism. And also, it is also our right to preserve the integrity of the country. So all these things, all these components are there in nationalism. And India, if we see, we have been having this idea of nationalism for thousands of years. It is not as though the British gave us this idea of nationalism. We had this cultural nationalism for thousands of years, and if we see our own traditions, every day in the morning, when we do our prayers, we recite so many shlokas. Bharatavarshe, Bharatakande, we recite so many sentences and shlokas. Bharatavarshe, Bharatakande, etc. And then we have got, we invoke the holy waters of all the rivers, Gangecha, Yamunecha, etc. We invoke the holy waters of all the rivers into that vessel which we are having. And then we have this 18 Shakti Pitas all over the country, spread all over the country. We have got Dwadasha Jyotirlingas spread all over the country. And again we have got all the holy rivers, and then in fact you must have seen that book, the geography, Sacred Geography by one American professor, Diana Eek. It's a good book. And we also had the tradition of pilgrimages all over the country. One who visits Kashi has to visit Rameshwaram and vice versa. So that way we had that cultural integration. And all our pandits traveled all over the country. All our scholars traveled all over the country from times immemorial. And one very famous person like that is Shankaracharya, who traveled from Kerala to Kashmir. And then he debated with so many scholars. And what was the link language at that time? The link language was Sanskrit. Sanskrit was the link language. We had that cultural identity all over the country, that cultural nationalism all over the country. In fact, there were some small kingdoms. There is no doubt about it. Not many small kingdoms were there. But we had this idea of oneness for the last several thousands of years. This is our basic strength, which we are forgetting now. And now we are thinking that, oh, Tamilians are different and these people are different. And all these differences have come only in the recent years. But then, even during the British time, the nationalism was so strong, and then during the independence movement also, nationalism was so strong. That is the only reason why we got that independence. Though several kingdoms were there, how were they together? Because the whole country was guided by the cultural vision which was given by our great sages like Vyasa, Valmiki, etc. It is not as though there was something like some parallel institutions like this Holy Roman Empire. There is no such thing like that. There was no such thing like a Holy Roman Empire which was controlling the entire Europe. It was nothing like that. It is only the intellectual empire which created by Vyasa and Valmiki which controlled this entire land. And that vision, cultural vision which was given by these people and eminent sages who gave us the Upanishads. So that Upanishadic philosophy, it united the country. And we had some internal fights between groups like Vaishnavas and Shaivas, etc., when we forgot the philosophy of the Upanishads. So long as the philosophy of Upanishads was strong in our minds, there was no internal quarrel. There was total, a harmonization of various sects. In fact, Shankaracharya, he harmonized so many sects. So many sects means so many traditions. Somebody was worshipping Vishnu, somebody was worshipping Shiva. We said all these things are forms of one reality. It's not as though we went about destroying others. We did not destroy anything. We only harmonized everything. So these are all the strengths in India. And we have been seeing of late, we were referring to these left liberals and left-wing intellectuals and our fight in the police. In fact, right from the day of joining police service, our fight is with the left-wing intellectuals only. Left-wing field level activists and also intellectuals. Field level activists, there is no problem of dealing with them because we arrest them, produce them in the court. But the intellectuals are the people who give them legitimacy, who create arguments, who want to use the constitution, who want to make use of all the liberties of all the rights guaranteed in the constitution in order to break the constitution. They are very highly intellectual in the sense intelligent, not intellectual, intelligent people who use the rights given in the guaranteed in the constitution in order to break the constitution. And that is precisely what is going on even now from various groups, whether it is left-wing group or whether it is terrorist group. All the terrorists also, they adopt the same modus operandi. So that is what we have been seeing in the recent times. And now Sri Ramchander was referring to the domination of this the superpowers, etc. And a new form of imperialism is now seen, where the sovereignty of the nations is questioned by what is called the Western universalism. About Western universalism, we have read from Rajiv Malhotra also. Most of us were present here during Rajiv Malhotra's meeting. And Rajiv Malhotra, in his recent book also, he has written about the Western, universalism and all that. And in his earlier book also, that is The Battle for Sanskrit. In that book also, he talked about the challenge, Indian challenge to Western universalism. So many of us are acquainted with that. So this is something, in my view, it is something which is a new form of imperialism, because it is nothing short of that. Because they say, yes, we have got all the right ideas with us and the whole world has to follow. And if we see the rise of this Western universalism also, where from did these ideas emerge? This also is something which I am surprised to see that some of the ideas which were there in the Upanishads, probably they were misunderstood. In fact, Mr. Yoram Hazony may like to probe further, because I always felt that people like Emerson, for example, Emerson wrote an article called Self-Reliance, and it is a rather long article. If we see that long article, Self-Reliance, it is mostly about self-realization, what Vedanta talks about self-realization. But he did not want to write about it to the Western audience, to the American audience, because he was already blacklisted by the church. At that time, he was blacklisted by the church, and though he didn't want to antagonize the church very much. So he wrote in a very, very camouflaged terms. And then writings like that, like Emerson's writings, and Rousseau writes the Social Contract. In that, the very first line, man is born free, but everywhere he is bound in chains. This is a statement right from the Upanishads. Anybody who is acquainted with the Upanishads will realize that it is a statement from the Upanishads only. You go to any Vedanta class, the first thing they say is you break off all the bonds. And a Jnani, a realized person, is one who transcends or rises above from all these bonds, all these social bonds which are actually artificial, they are not his real nature, etc., etc. A Jnani is supposed to be an Ativarnashrami, as per the Upanishads, that is a person who rises above all these social bonds. So what Rousseau wrote was actually a statement from the Upanishads. And we know that Voltaire, Rousseau and all these people, they were highly influenced by the Indian writings. And probably they did not want to say that these are all these ideas, because the Indian ideas are in a totally different context. A person who rises above all these social norms, etc., he is not going to break the social norms. But now, the Western individualism, what we see as individualism in America, is something where it is a lawless individualism. Whereas in India, the concept of Jnani, a person who rises above all norms, he is not going to break norms. He is already a person who is highly well disciplined. Such a disciplined person when he rises above all these norms in the sense that he is almost like divinity, he is almost like God, and then he is equal to every beings, all the living beings. He sees divinity in all the beings. So that is the idea of rising above all the bonds. But then this reckless individualism which we see in the West, it is something which I feel that it is something ideas which were rather wrongly understood by the Western writers, or probably they didn't want to say that these are all the ideas from the Indian say text, because we see that there are two stages of, or rather two intellectual revolutions in the West. That is, one is the Renaissance. 16th century Renaissance was one intellectual revolution, and the second revolution was the 18th century Enlightenment. About this 18th century Enlightenment, our scholars have not made much study. That is what I feel, because many of our scholars have to see what are all the contributions of Indian say texts to this Western social sciences, because most of the social sciences in the West developed during that period only. You take subjects like psychology, anthropology, various things like psychology, anthropology, linguistics, and many other concepts about political philosophy. All these things. When did they talk about the mind sciences? The mind sciences, in fact, the entire Western philosophy was about the external world. It was only an observation of the external world, but not the internal world. So this psychology and all these things, mindfulness, meditation, etc., these are all developed only after interaction with the Indian, and also Indian means including Buddhist texts. Not only, I am not talking about Hindu texts, not only Hindu texts, but Buddhist texts, because all the Indic religions, they are based on a philosophical inquiry. They are all having a philosophical base. They are not based on a belief system. So this is one thing which our Indian scholars also have to probe into. Then, now what is the situation? The situation is that now that the Western, that universalism has become very, very strong, and they are having so many ways of influencing various countries, and they are having various ways means, for example, they have got their own ideas about, say, women's rights, or rather, now the incident which has happened in Manipur, that is exploited beyond a particular point. And then something like relating to communal, say a particular community is not given, or rather discriminated. So these are things which can be exploited. These are things which make them interfere in the country. And we have seen that how the British people, during the British India, they encouraged various divisive forces within the country. And all this, in fact, the South India, even now the plans is to divide this South India, and probably the Tamil Nadu, etc. They will try to declare independence. And there are so many people who are willing to support all these things, all these external agencies who are willing to support all the breaking India forces. So this is what we see. And unfortunately, the rise of all these political parties, this also, if we see, obviously they are all supported by, they are all funded by, they are all guided by, tutored by various external agencies. We can see that. There is no, suddenly a political party which is led by a total stranger, it comes to power. It comes to power, and then how? It is supported by all the left lobbies, all the left lobbies and the entire, the so-called liberal lobby. And then a political party comes into power. So how can we explain all this? And we have been seeing so many other toolkit gangs and all these things, people like George Soros, etc., who have been operating in sort of freelance regime change person. So these are the things which we have been seeing. And one strange thing is, though the Western nations say that church and politics are separate, the Western nations, their actual stand is that religion has nothing to do with politics. But what is happening is, religion is not different from imperialism, particularly the two Abrahamic religions. Of course, when I refer to Abrahamic religions, I am not referring to Judaism, because Judaism, their God also is like our God. The God of the Jews, He does not tell you go and invade the whole world. He doesn't tell. Our God also doesn't tell. So unfortunately, that is the reason why they are also the victims and we are also the victims in history. So there, the two Abrahamic religions I am referring to Christianity and Islam. They have this imperialism also. Imperialism is integral with the religion. There is no doubt about it. There is no need to hide also because they also are aware of it, and every day when they talk about it, it is actually an imperialistic push only which they are giving. So, but then we are not able to handle it in the sense that there are various limitations. There are various limitations in handling them because they say, yes, you are communal. When they say you are communal, how can I be communal? Because our religion is something which is the only liberal religion in the whole world. In the sense that Hinduism is the only liberal religion which says that you worship God in any form, you take any form, any name. And when my religion says like that, how can I be a sort of a communal person? I want to save this particular tradition. I want to save this particular, say, culture. So that is our position. For the Abrahamic religions, it is one more war. For example, for Christianity, it is one more nation to be gained into Christianity. Or for the Islamic world, it is one more jihad against India. But then for us, it is a question of survival. For the entire, all the religions, not only Hinduism, but Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, etc., for all of us, it is a question of survival. So this is what we have to see. And the anti-India forces are very strong. Just now we were discussing about the China and also the Islamic world. They are together. And you are all aware of this phrase called the Red-Green Alliance. The Red-Green Alliance is, red is the China and also the green is the Islamic world. They are creating as much nuisance in America as in India. Fortunately for us, even America is not very strong. America, if they were to be strong, they would needle us. They would needle every country. But then they are also very, very weak. And this left liberal activity in America, in my view, my suspicion is that it is all orchestrated by China and these people only. Because many of the programs in American universities are funded by Saudi Arabia and other Islamic countries, maybe Qatar or some other country. And this Red-Green Alliance is creating problems in all the Western countries, so that is also what we are seeing. And then, what is our strength in this particular context? What is our strength? Our strength is basically our philosophy. Our Ramchander was telling about the greatness of our tradition, but then unfortunately, we are cut off from that tradition for the last 3 to 4 generations. In fact, our Sanskrit education has almost disappeared. And even after independence, our leaders were so short-sighted that they totally ignored the tradition, and they also handed over our education to other people. We did not have control of our own education system. All our education, that machinery, the entire machinery was handed over to left liberals and all such people. So the books which we read in the name of history were only feel-good, something to do with some feel-good factor. So we all read lies in the name of history. So these are the things which have taken place. And then all the political parties, they only tried to survive. They only tried to survive by creating vote banks. Unfortunately, they did not try to unite the country. Any ruler has to unite the people. But unfortunately, in our country, even the one party which ruled the country for a long time, even they created vote banks. They divided people, and they just wanted to survive. They wanted to be in power. They allowed all the people, whether it is Bangladesh refugees or refugees from some other place, refugees from Burma, all those Rohingyas, etc. We allowed everybody to come in just to be in power, just to have some voters, just to have certain groups, dedicated vote bank groups. And in turn, what is going to happen? In turn, they will also have a tough bargaining. So their potential to break the country is also increasing. So this is all we have to see. So these are the points which I wanted to say. And the coming elections, probably they will be very, very tough. It is very clear that it will be between nationalist forces. That is, those who want to have the country united and those who just want to survive in power. Whether America takes over, whether China takes over, okay, let country break into pieces, so long as we are okay today. So that is going to be the situation. And it is a grim scenario from my point of view. It is a grim scenario. I don't think it is a very, it is a challenging scenario. It is not a very, say, optimistic thing. That is what I see. And if we allow things to drift in this manner, but the reason why there is lack of nationalism in the country is also because, in my view, it is also because most of us are ignorant of our own philosophical strength. Because why there is no nationalism among people? If we really know that we belong to a great tradition, there will be sense of, say, that pride. We don't have that sense of pride. That is because we are cut off from the knowledge of our own tradition. We never read what is there in the Gita, and we never read what is the philosophy of the Upanishads. It is only when we read the books of Vivekananda, at least the books of Vivekananda, because Vivekananda is one man who consolidated and gave the philosophy of Upanishads in a very, very capsule form in his books. So unless it is compulsory, it is made compulsory to at least all of us, there is a need to train lot many people who are well versed with the tradition, and then these people have to go about like preachers to all villages, and then we have to build up a large team of, let us say, nationalists and also patriots. Right now, Sri Ramchander was asked about the difference between a nationalist and a patriot. I could not say immediately, but then my feeling is that patriotism is a slightly stronger form of nationalism. Nationalism, you are only convinced about the philosophy, but then a patriot is one who is also willing to fight for that. So that is what I thought. So with these views, I take leave. I thank Sri Ramchander Garu for having given me the opportunity. The situation, as I said, appears to be very grim, and if we allow things to drift in this manner, our country will be like Nigeria, Rwanda, where two groups of people will be at arms perpetually. So that is the likely situation if we allow things to drift, and we are at a very dangerous point. With these few ideas, I again thank Ramchander Garu. It was a great privilege to share the dais with a philosopher like Yoram Hazony. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful explanation of the entire nationalism from the Puranic mythological days to the present day. I acknowledge the presence of Sri Narasimha Sharma, the senior advocate, and then I acknowledge the presence of Srimati Karuna Gopal. She is here with us. She is senior leader in BJP. I also acknowledge the presence of Dr. Y.L. Srinivas, English professor, and many here, Dr. Padma Virupneni, and many are there here, whose presence has made this program a wonderful evening. Before our chief guest speaks, I would like to draw two things here. What Mr. Arvind said, that today nationalism is very important for us. In fact, when I visited Israel, I have seen that there is a rule there that every able-bodied man who are between the age of 18 to 21 years, whether a girl or a boy, they must work in the Israeli armed forces. Otherwise, they will not get admission in the universities. It is the rule there. And that is why the nationalism in Israel, I think it should be an example for the entire world how nationalism works. In fact, Israel is a very small nation, earlier I told, and it is surrounded by enemies. And the survival instinct on the basis of the nationhood which makes that country a great country today. And today really we are proud of Israel, and today Mr. P.V. Narasimha, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they made a diplomatic relation with Israel which was isolated from the entire world because of several reasons. And today we have drip irrigations here in agriculture. It is because of our tie-up with Israel that today we are using drip irrigation, which our dry arid lands are now getting cultivated. So we are happy that amongst us Mr. Hussain is there, who in fact as introduced by Sri Krishna Reddy about him. I don't want to waste much of your time. I now request our chief guest to kindly address us.
Well, good evening. It is a tremendous honor to speak here before such a crowd. This is my first time in India. It's not my first time speaking in India, but it's my first week in India. And there are many, many things that I don't know about India, many things that I still need to learn. And I'm grateful to the Honorable Chairman, the Honorable Professor, for sharing a stage with me. As I walked in, I met a few of the younger men here, and they all wanted to ask me about geopolitics. We'll get to geopolitics, but I would like to, with your permission, to begin somewhere else. I'm, as you've already heard, I'm an Israeli. I live in Jerusalem. My wife and I are Orthodox Jews. We raise our children in the old Jewish tradition. And at the same time, I am the chairman of an international organization called the Edmund Burke Foundation, which has been organizing alliances among nationalists, conservatives and nationalists in North America and Europe now for a number of years. So I will begin and speak to you about things that have to do with Judaism and Israel, and then I will expand to talk about North America and Europe and geopolitics after that. So please, if you only want to hear about geopolitics, a little bit of patience, we'll get there. As I think, as the professor said, Judaism is very different from both Islam and Christianity, and it's difficult to understand the history of the West or even the history of our world if you don't know a little bit about Judaism. Now, you may know a little bit, but I might also surprise you. The Hebrew Bible, when I talk about the Hebrew Bible or the Jewish Bible, I'm talking about what Christians call the Old Testament. Okay, it's the first 80% of the Christian Bible. The Christian Bible has a New Testament that talks about Jesus. We don't have it. Judaism does not have anything like that. Our Bible begins with the creation of the world and the creation of many nations by God. And then God is disappointed with the world, and he is impressed with a man named Abraham. And God says to Abraham, I will make of you a great nation, and through you all of the peoples of the earth will be blessed. Okay, so pay attention. At the very, very beginning of Judaism, Abraham speaks to what we believe is the one God who created heaven and earth, and God says to him, I will make you a great nation. So at the very beginning, Judaism speaks about nations. He will make Abraham a great nation, not many, many nations, one great nation. But through you, all of the peoples of the earth will be blessed. So this is something that maybe you can recognize from your tradition also a little bit. That there is no ambition on the part of the Jews to go out and conquer the whole world and turn everybody into Jews. Jews are one nation. But there is an ambition to serve all of mankind, and through Judaism that the peoples of the world should be blessed. Now, in our Bible is mostly, there are many things in our Bible, many different texts, many different prophets and scholars, but mostly what is in our Bible is the story of this nation. The nation becomes enslaved, the nation leaves slavery, the nation receives a law, the nation enters a land, fights wars, builds up an independent country, it splits, brothers kill each other, and in the end, the nation falls. At the very end of the Bible, the Jews who are scattered by the Babylonians, they begin to return to Israel. All right, so this story, there are many things there, but mostly it's a story of a people. And instead of being like most peoples, that they're born, they live, they die, they disappear, here there's a vision that even a nation that is scattered, that is defeated, that is sent to the corners of the earth, that nation should be able, if it is faithful, if it's faithful to its traditions and to its God and to its law, that it should be able someday to come back. And as you know, in modern times, we Jews see the state of Israel as the fulfillment of a promise from our Bible, that God says that even if you'll be scattered to the corners of the earth, I will find you and I will bring you back. Okay, so you'll notice that this nation, the Jewish people, is, first of all, it's from most of its history, it's a nation without a state. The government is, most of the time, it's a government of someone else. But the Jews remain a nation and a people through their language, traditions, customs, religion, scripture, through studying scripture. Okay, so this is the Jewish people. Now, let's talk a little bit about the West. People keep asking me in India whether Judaism is more the West or more the East, and I have to admit that it's not so simple. One of the reasons that it's not so simple is we've already discussed, which is that because the Jewish people has in its Bible, Moses, our greatest prophet, tells the Jewish people that we're not allowed to cross the borders to conquer other peoples. In other words, what makes Judaism a nationalism? What makes it a model for nationalism? Well, first of all, that the Jewish people, that they're a nation. Second, that they have, Moses tells them, you have to have a king who's from your own people, not a foreign king. You have to have prophets from your own people, not foreign prophets. You have to have a law that's your own law and not foreign laws. But Moses also tells the Jewish people at the very, very beginning of their history, he says, here are your borders, and you're not allowed to cross these borders. You're not allowed to take one inch, 1 centimeter of the land of the neighboring peoples, because God gave lands to all of the peoples, and it's not your job to go and conquer them. So it's an interesting combination. We believe that Moses is speaking to the creator of heaven and earth. We believe that we received a law from him that is the moral law and that it's good for all nations. But on the other hand, we're not allowed to conquer. We're not allowed to cross the border. The border is, at the beginning, it's not to keep people out, it's to keep us in. We're not allowed to go and try to conquer the world. And in this, Judaism is different from the Assyrian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Hellenistic empires of the Greeks, the Roman Empire. All of these empires that are known to the Jews, all of these empires, they're very different from one another, but they share one trait in common. All of the empires that I just named. They share this belief that the God came to speak to the Babylonian king or to the Assyrian king, and to give him a command, conquer the four corners of the earth. Why? So that wars will stop, so that through your conquests you will bring peace and prosperity to the world. So here's a fascinating thing, that Israel is attacked and conquered over and over again. But the prophets of Israel, the Jewish Bible, it's the only text from our region, from the Middle East. Now maybe it's similar to your text, but from the Middle East, the Bible, the Jewish Bible is the only text that regards the imperialists who say we're going to conquer the earth in order to make peace. We're going to conquer the earth to bring prosperity. The Jewish prophets create the only text that says, no, these are criminals. It's a crime. All the Jewish prophets often disagree with one another. Jews always argue with one another. But on this, they all agree. They see the great empires trying to conquer the world, and they say, you say it's for good reason. You say it's to bring prosperity and peace. But the truth is that you come and you destroy everything you find. You destroy all of the original indigenous ideas. You murder the people. You steal the land. You enslave the people, the women and the children. This is the way that the Jewish prophets speak about the great empires. And when they speak about a future vision of a better world, the prophets are famous for talking about what will happen someday. And what they hope to see someday, the promise of the Jewish prophets, is something that I think that we nationalists, we can recognize. They promise a world of independent nations. That someday the lion will lie down with the lamb. You've all heard that expression. What does it mean? It means, according to the prophet Isaiah, it means that the great powers will stop trying to conquer all the small powers and force them to be their slaves. And the great big powers will allow the small powers to be themselves, to have today what we today call self-determination. Right, one last thing I'll say about nationalism in the Jewish Bible. Today, from professors you hear from the West, that nationalism is about homogeneity, about making everyone in a nation the same. But all you need to do is open the Jewish Bible to see that this is the opposite of what it says. I've already told you that the Jewish Bible talks about the many nations of the world, each one will be independent, and hopefully someday they live in peace together. But also internally, there's no homogeneous tribe. The Jews are not homogeneous. The Jews are not all the same. The Jews begin as many different tribes. And for the first centuries of their living on the land, those many different tribes, they fight, they're at war, they have different customs, they have different ways of speaking, we see in the Bible, that they don't speak the same. They have different traditions, they have different kinds of work, and they fight with one another. And when the Jewish nation is united, it is the unification of many different tribes. Okay, and the definition of a nation, if it comes from the Jewish Bible, the definition of a nation is always many different tribes who are united by an inheritance. It could be a language, it could be a literature, a law, ancestry. That's one thing, is they're united by a certain cultural inheritance that they share. And secondly, they share also a history of joining together, fighting battles together, suffering defeat together, enjoying great victories together. And that second part is what allows them to become like brothers. In a good nation, the different tribes become like brothers. And they fight together against foreign enemies, and they fight for one another. And they tolerate one another. Okay, so I've now given you an introduction to the political ideas of the Jewish Bible. Let's look at the West. The West, as you know, is a creation mostly for 2,000 years of the Christians. And the Christians, they have their own Bible that they add to the Jewish Bible. And they have many different traditions. The relationships between Christian traditions and Jewish traditions are very complicated, and there are many different kinds of relationships. Some Christian traditions take the Jewish Bible very seriously. I mean, all of them think that you're a heretic. If a Christian says, I don't believe in the Jewish Bible, then all the Christians will say you're a heretic. But some of them take the Jewish Bible very seriously, and some of them take it less seriously. Now, the Christians have another model which is different from the Jewish nation, the independent Jewish nation that is the model of the prophets in the Bible. They have the Roman Empire as an example. And all through Western history, there's a seesaw, kind of an intellectual and spiritual struggle within the Christian world between those who are closer to Rome and say Christianity should conquer the whole world, and those who are closer to Israel and say, what do you mean? Look in our Bible, it says that conquering the world is evil, and that different nations should be allowed different paths. In Christianity, there are different parts of it, and they struggle to this day between those who see Christianity as primarily a Roman inheritance. This is, by the way, this is not a difference between Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox. It's all, there are streams in each of them. But the important thing for us is that the Christians in many places and in many times they adopt the nationalist model of the Jewish Bible. They adopt the example of Israel. And so you see explicitly in different places, in England, in the Netherlands, in Poland and Hungary, in France, and later also in Italy, you see the vision of the Jewish prophets of a world of independent nations, that it begins to become a reality in the West. Let's say in the 1500s. The story is much more complicated, but I'll make it simple. The first clear independent nation in Europe that we would recognize, an independent national state, the English declare independence in the 1530s. The Dutch declare independence in the 1580s. After the 30 Years' War, we have France and Switzerland and Sweden. They declare independence from the Holy Roman Empire, and they say, we're not going to be part of your empire anymore. We want our own path to God. We want a world of independent nations where different nations will be able to live in peace. Now you can look at this, and it's completely fair to say, what are you talking about, Yoram? You know what the British did and what the Dutch did and how they tried to take over the world, and I'm not here to argue with you about this. It's very rare to have a nation that stays within its own borders, as India does, as Israel does. But still the vision, this ideal, it enters into the world. When we reach the 20th century and we hear Westerners supporting an independent Israel and an independent India, this is something that comes to them through the fact that they have the Jewish Bible, that they have the Jewish prophets, and somewhere in their hearts they oftentimes can remember that different peoples have different paths to God, and different peoples deserve their independence, and that an empire which tries to conquer the whole world is usually evil. Okay, so let's take this up to today and look at our world. I want to talk about nationalism today. After the Second World War, you all know this at one level or another. After the Second World War, the word nationalism, which before the Second World War was something that generous people, that good-hearted people would say, yes, I support independence for India and for the Jews and for the Ethiopians. It was that generosity that was associated with the word nationalism, that generosity disappears after the Second World War. And you know why? Because Adolf Hitler used the word nationalism. Hitler was no nationalist. I apologize, I know that sounds strange to you, but since I don't recommend that you read his writings, but you can open Mein Kampf and you can read it. There's no world of independent nations in Nazism. Hitler's goal in Mein Kampf is that the German people should be the lord of the globe, the mistress of the earth. Hitler is a biological imperialist. He wants the German race to govern the entire, to conquer and govern the world. He's not like a Jew, he's like a Roman. His inheritance, when he says the Third Reich, he's talking about we Germans, we need to be like the Holy Roman Empire, we need to rule the world. We need to be like the Roman Empire, we need to try to rule the world. All right, so things become very confused after the Second World War. Then, after the Second World War, because Hitler calls himself a nationalist, when in fact he's a racist and an imperialist, but all the Marxist scholars, the liberal scholars who began immediately after the war talking about nationalism, they turn it on its head and they say, no. Nationalism has nothing to do with the Jews or the Bible or India. Nationalism is what the Germans do. And so for decades, we hear professors who come and explain to us that our nationalism, thousands of years of our nationalism, yours and ours, and other people's as well, thousands of years of our nationalism is illegitimate because in Germany, they don't know the concept of borders. See, Germany never had borders up until the 20th century. But Russia also never had borders. There are nations which never accepted the idea of borders. China has never accepted the idea of borders. Okay? But to take this Nazism and say, well, that's nationalism, this is a wonderful discovery of the liberal professors and the Marxist professors, that anytime they meet a nationalist, they can say, oh, you're evil, sit down. You're a terrible person. The things you believe in are against humanity, sit down. Because liberalism has the answers, Marxism has the answers, communism has the answers. And you're nationalists. We don't need to hear from you. We know what kind of evil you are. And so people today, when they ask me, what is all this hatred against Hindu nationalism that comes from all of these, from the European Union and from liberal Americans, and what is this? So you should understand what it is. Liberalism is a secular Christianity. It's a rebellion against Christianity. It rejects Christian scripture. It rejects the Christian God. Liberalism says we believe in one thing, the reason of the human mind. All human beings can reason, and all of us need to come to certain conclusions. They give you a list of what the conclusions are. You know them. All men are created free. All men are created equal. You cannot have any obligations to your parents or to society or to your country or to your heritage. There are no obligations unless you chose them, unless you consented. That's liberalism. And liberalism also believes in rationalism, which means that every one of us, if we think very carefully, will end up being liberals. So probably you're not aware of this, but the classical liberal tradition, left liberalism, right liberalism, they're the same on this. The classical liberal tradition is a tradition which says there's only one right answer to the way the world should be ruled, and it's according to liberalism. And this is the great event after the Second World War, is that America stops being a Christian nation. Officially, the judges say we're not a Christian nation now. We don't believe in that anymore. In Europe, the nations stop being Christian nations, and they all become liberal nations. But the problem with this liberalism is that it is extremely expansionist. It is extremely intolerant. It is extremely aggressive. Liberals always, when you talk to a liberal, they always say, yes, we tolerate everyone. We welcome everyone, all ideas. But if you actually see where it goes, you'll see, no, they don't tolerate nationalists. They don't tolerate Christians or Muslims or Hindus. Well, maybe Muslims, that's a complicated story, but they don't tolerate anyone who says, let me live my way, because they say, no, your way is primitive. Your way has been overtaken by history. History and reason have overcome your way, and your way is no longer valid. Your way is oppressive. Our way liberates mankind. This new form of American and European thinking, it reaches a kind of a crescendo, an explosion. You can almost say a drunkenness after 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Americans and the Europeans defeat the communists, and suddenly President George H.W. Bush in 1990 stands up and he says, there will be a new world order. New world order? When did you ever hear the Americans talking about a new world order? Suddenly, there'll be a new world order. There'll be one law for all the nations of the world. President Bush said, the rule of law will replace the law of the jungle. He says, for 100 generations we've been striving, but it will happen now. You know what this is. You've heard it before. This sounds like Messianism. This sounds like a Roman imperialism. Or like the Holy Roman Empire. It sounds like the Muslim Caliphate. They're saying one law for the whole world, and we will bring it to you because you need our law. That's the liberalism that took over beginning in 1990. Maybe you don't call it liberalism. Maybe you call it globalism. Maybe you call it the rules-based international order. Maybe you call it liberal internationalism. It has many names, but it is only one thing. It is a view that says that those post-Christians, the secular former Christians in American Europe who've overthrown their Christianity, they threw out the traditions of their fathers and mothers, they threw out their historic religion, they threw out their traditional customs, and now they're coming to say that you also must throw away your traditions and your customs and join one world without borders. So when you look at the European Union, it's 1992, and all the nations of Europe take down their borders and they become the European Union. What is the European Union? The European Union is an international government which insists that first, that all the borders need to be removed, and second, that all the decisions will be made in Brussels, and third, that everyone in Europe should give up their own currency. Right? No more francs, no more Deutschmarks, no more lira. You give up your currency and they give you bills, European Union bills, the euro. And you look at the euro, I don't know if you've ever looked at it, it's the craziest thing. All the different euro bills have on them pictures of buildings that do not exist anywhere. It's all fantasy. They didn't say, let's take one beautiful building from every country or one hero from every country. No, they say, no, we're starting from the beginning. Buildings and windows and bridges that do not exist anywhere. We made them up. It's a fantasy. But this is a dangerous fantasy. This is a fantasy which once your elites, the judges in your country maybe, the judges in my country, in Israel, once they stop saying that Israel is important, they start saying, you know what it matters to me is what the European judges say. And the journalists start saying, I don't really care so much about what Israelis say because they're primitive, they have too much Judaism, too much religion. I care about what the European journalists or the American journalists say. And I don't care about making movies here about our traditions. We're going to watch movies that are going to be against our country and make the movie makers in Europe and in America on the left happy. Right? So once they start talking like this, once the elites, they go to university and the professors teach them that nationalism is evil and that the traditional religions of your nation are evil and that the customs that you have are evil, and the professors take your children and turn them into liberal internationalists. And these liberal internationalists, I know that many of you think, I'd like to be liberal, I'd like to be generous and kind and tolerant. But these liberal internationalists, they're not generous or kind or tolerant. They only tolerate themselves. And so what we see is from 1992, the Europeans eliminate their borders with the Treaty of Maastricht. In 1993, with the Oslo Accords in Israel, we have the same elites saying we're going to eliminate the borders of Israel. Israel and the Arabs of the Middle East are going to become one big Europe with no borders. You may not believe it, but it happened to us. Prime Minister Peres in 1995 published a book called The New Middle East, where he said that the Jews, that the intellectual and liberal Jews and the intellectual and liberal Arabs would join together like in Europe, and they would together suppress and eliminate the religious and traditional people who are holding the world back. That was our Prime Minister wrote this book. And then in 2005, the World Trade Organization brings China in because these are utopians, they're fantasists. Instead of thinking, is this good for my people? Is this good for our people? They think, you know what? It's good for the planet, we'll all be liberals. And they believed that they were going to turn China into a liberal country. They took a poor, backward China, they elevated it over 25 years, they elevated it to be the second richest and most powerful country in the world. And now they're surprised to discover that the Chinese are not willing to give up on their own interests. The Chinese are not willing to join one liberal world order that's controlled by Washington and Brussels. Okay, so now we come to 2016. 2016 is the year that the British people shock the world by voting to leave the European Union. 2016 is the year that the American people shock the world by electing Donald Trump, who says America first. Okay, now you may not like Brexit and you might not like Donald Trump. I'm not here campaigning for any of them. But notice what's happening. What they're doing is they're saying to the globalists, no more, no more. You can't take all the factories in America and send them to China. The wealthy Americans can't take their factories that they own and send them to China and leave the American workers without factories and without jobs. They say you can't allow the Chinese to continue to be an aggressive dictatorship with imperial aspirations and say they get to become the major industrial power in the world and use the money in order to buy America and Europe. So for the first time in 2016, we see a resistance. This resistance, we'll call it nationalist conservatism. It's just nationalism. But the nationalists are not only defending the idea that we should have borders, that we should be, that the globalists can't tell us that the whole world should flood into our country and get citizenship. The liberals think you should be able to live wherever you want. Every individual is free. If anyone in the world who wants to live in India should be able to live in India. Anyone who wants to live in America should live in America. That's the globalists. That's their liberalism. And if you are Israel or Hungary or Poland or Italy, and you say, no, we want to defend our borders, we want to decide who will be living in our country, they say you're a fascist, they say you're a racist. They say you're a nationalist and it's evil to be a nationalist. So this nationalism, it begins with wanting to reclaim national independence, the right of a people to determine its own what happens in its own borders, its own laws, its own constitution, its own religious provisions and traditions, the way that it's going to deal with the different communities in the country, these things have to be decided in each nation. Right? National conservatism begins as a rebellion in America and Britain, and it spreads. And today we have, in every North American and European country, we have organized national conservative intellectual groups, scholars, journalists, and also political parties, whose goal is to return us to this old national conservative, you can say biblical vision, that we want to see the nations of the world, or as many as possible, enjoy an independence. Instead of having some center, it doesn't matter if it's a center in China or in America or in Europe that determines the law for everyone. We believe in a world in which the different nations will have their own traditions and they will find their own path to God. All right, so I've spoken quite a bit. I will stop here, and I'd be happy to hear comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful explanation of the nationalism across the world and the geopolitics and regarding the Israel situation and how the Jews had